Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And this feature is likely to be a tad long. I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can, but I'm covering a ton of material here. And I'm reminded of that commercial way back when, I think it was Dow scrubbing bubbles. My father would say, you better remember if it's Dow, since that's where he worked for some 26 years. But the commercial had those bubbles going down the drain and said, we work hard so you don't have to. And I'm hoping that there may be some appreciation of that fact with regard to this post, because beneath the post we are going to provide basically an avalanche of court filings in federal court in the Eastern District of New Orleans, all of which I have read, and that is required a pretty significant amount of time. And I have no notes for any of this, and so I may get a few points wrong or slightly off, but the documents are there to go and fact check, and hopefully my memory will be pretty sharp, certainly going to be sharper than someone that was on national television this past Thursday. That I'm not going to go off on that. It was just a very disheartening thing to watch, but it's not the purpose of this blog, but it was a little sad to see that. Let me just say this. We're going to be providing two updates. One with regard to Carl Cavalier, who we've not reported on for a while, and the other with regard to former Lieutenant, Louisiana State Police Lieutenant John Stelly, whom we last reported upon, I believe, in December of last year. He is the one who has the reverse discrimination suit that is pending against state police. This will be a major update on the Stelly matter. But let me just start off, because as I said in the headline, former Lieutenant Stelly is about to be where Carl Cavalier was when it came to this mandatory settlement conference. But before I get into that, let me just update everyone on Carl Cavalier. That's not going to take that long. As anyone may remember, he appealed the decision of the lower court not to reconsider the matter with regard to him having to accept the $200,000 settlement with the condition that he no longer be employed by Louisiana State Police. He appealed that pro se, representing himself, to the Fifth Circuit, the U.S. Fifth Circuit. They issued the ruling earlier this past week, I believe on the 27th, give or take. I don't know, I've looked at too many filings, but it was definitely this past week, and they have affirmed the lower court's ruling. So I don't think, at least in my take, that was not a huge surprise and was largely expected. The other matter that I'm going to mention with regard to Carl Cavalier, for a long time, I made a determination that I was not going to reference this fact, but I am now going to reference it, and I will tell you why in just a moment. But back toward the end of last year, November, December, I don't remember the exact date, but Carl had to face the financial reality that he had to file bankruptcy. And the only reason I'm deciding to change my original inclination way back when this happened, that I was not going to report on it, is the fact that now this $200,000, the status of it has now become considerably more complicated. And the bankruptcy trustee, we'll give you the document for that, has basically asserted that, I'm paraphrasing, but look, I've never seen anything like this in my life. As most people would know, the bankruptcy trustees, his sole mission, his or her sole mission, is to maximize the proceeds for the unsecured creditors. And this is an admittedly bizarre situation that at the time of that filing, the appeal was still pending. The appeal is now resolved, but it will call into question how this $200,000 is going to be allocated in light of the bankruptcy filing. And that's the sole reason that I'm reporting on it now. I did reach out to a couple of folk to try to get their, oh, I left out, the bankruptcy trustee basically said I'm gonna have to bring in an expert in trying to navigate through this, because it's just something he'd never encountered. And I would imagine it's most would be the case with just about any bankruptcy trustee. So from my own vantage point, and I realize from what the conversations that I've had with people that I respect in this matter, although they're not bankruptcy attorneys, I would have thought that pure equity would have caused Jill Craft to have a priority claim of $80,000, which is the 40% of the $200,000, somewhat similar to having an actual mortgage on a property, and that would be a priority claim. Those folk that I have consulted have told me they don't believe that's the way it's going to work, and that this $200,000 will be just divvied up amongst all of the unsecured creditors, of which they deem Jill Craft to be. I don't want anybody to think I feel sorry for Jill Craft. I think most people would find that difficult to do, and those folks are consulted on the matter were none too pleased about Jill Craft's handling of Carl Cavalier's matter, and I would share those sentiments. I just would have thought that there would have been something perhaps in place to protect her interest in having obtained that judgment, since she did obtain it. But I'm being told that that's not the way that's going to work. I'm sure that if there is any mechanism, Ms. Craft will certainly make filings to try and ensure she does get her fair share, because don't forget there are two other attorneys who are trying to say they're entitled to some money. So that's why I think the bankruptcy trustees had to resort to hiring an expert, which is going to further read into the funds, but that's the update on Carl Cavalier. I would have to figure this is the end of the road, because, or at least with regard to his matter, because I think an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court would be completely fruitless, and I don't think they would even accept the writ and would dismiss it. And so there's nothing left. It's a little disheartening, because I believe that Carl did a service to us all. Some can argue about his methodology and this, that, and the other, but I don't think we would have the kind of knowledge we have without some of the things he was willing to risk. So, as I said, the majority of this feature will focus on John Stelly, and there's been oh my God, has there been an avalanche of activity in that suit here in the last 30 days. You're going to get links for individual documents, but I'm going to just try in this video to hit the very high points as best I can remember, those that I deem to be the matters that I needed to convey here. But you're welcome to read just like I did. You're going to be reading a while if you choose to do that. But here's the deal. Just like Carl Cavalier was forced into a settlement conference, so too has the judge in Stelly's matter. It's set for July the 24th. It is mandatory, and you can click on the parameters. They even get down to talking about parking, get the parking lined up, because we don't want time wasted going to feed a meter. But you can look at this mandatory settlement conference and its parameters, and I guess a lesson to be learned from Carl is that, look, make sure you get precisely what you want from this, although in Stelly's case I think it's a little simpler because it can only be money. I don't see him wanting to come back to LSP, especially now that he lives, I believe, in Montana. But at any rate, I'm just saying that once you say okay, it may be oral, but once you say okay, they're off to the races, and Carl Cavalier is living proof of that. So that settlement conference will be on July the 24th. I will also point out that that judge has issued a mandate, and we'll give you the link for that, that no later than 10 days prior to the trial, John Stelly, by mandate, must make a demand of LSP of what it would take to settle this suit. And likewise, by mandate, LSP is required to respond no later than 7 days prior to trial. So we'll give you that document. LSP has filed a motion, and we'll give you that filing as well, wherein they are seeking to strike testimony by Mr. Stelly, as well as another statistician that he hired. They're wanting for Stelly not to be deemed to be an expert witness, and they're challenging the methodology of the other statistician. Likewise, Stelly has filed a motion to exclude a statistician that LSP hired. Their findings are in difference to one another. If you want to go through and read some of those methodologies of stats, you'll probably conk off real fast. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I tried to absorb all of that either, even though I do consider myself someone who likes math. That's getting pretty deep in the weeds, this Monte Carlo method and this, that, and the other. But at any rate, there is some squabbling going over on the statistical side. LSP also seeks to have the personnel records of a number of key witnesses in this trial to be filed strictly under seal, citing a right to privacy. Mr. Stelly's attorney has basically said baloney. The public has a right to know, and I don't want to put words into his mouth, but basically like the public has a right to know the level of competence that exists in some of these appointments, as well as other factors, and the judge will have to make the decision on that. The LSP kind of countered that, look, we let you conduct depositions during which these problematic discipline infractions, and there's more than one, but most notably in this is Robert Burns. No relation to this Robert Burns, as I have to always state. But he was promoted within about a couple of years for using the MDT terminals to look up things about his ex-wife and I believe her boyfriend, or whatever the case. Like I said, I've read a lot. You can get the specifics of who all he looked up, but it was 52, and he admitted to that, and was that's all within the deposition. So LSP is saying that, look, the rest of this stuff needs to be filed under seal because it can be embarrassing, and they are posing those arguments. Meanwhile, the Louisiana State Police Commission has come in and filed basically a friend of the court filing. That was filed on Friday of this past week, the 28th. Lenore Feeney filed that. And what it essentially says is that, look, we got a massive public records request from the plaintiff in this matter, and we fulfilled it, and we labeled the pages confidential, and we've agreed to remove that confidential, but we want these test scores redacted because there again, this may be an embarrassment. Most of you know or may remember that when I sued state police over the Scott Lopez matter over counseling letters, there again, right to privacy. To me, there is so little accountability to the public about the actions of some of these troopers that it's pathetic, and I don't know how you ever raise the level of respect for state police when you're constantly more concerned about, oh, he might be embarrassed. I got permission to say this. So former retired Lieutenant Leon Bucky Miet said, if you may be embarrassed by your score, don't take the test. So I don't know. It's a little bit bewildering. Also, State Police has filed a motion for summary judgment. I have read very thoroughly both the motion for summary judgment as well as the most recent reading that I made prior to coming to film this, which was the opposition memorandum, which was not easy to file, to fish out of the PACER system, because somebody ought to alert those folk to give a little bit more description. Don't just put memorandum in response. And memorandums in response to what? With all these filings, I'm supposed to figure out which memorandum. I finally got it. Because I knew there had to be one. I mean, you're going to file a motion for summary judgment. The other side's going to file an opposition memorandum. It's just trying to fish it out of there is not easy. I'm glad y'all let me vent a little. PACER overall is a great system. Only charges 10 cents a page, which is very economical. It charges you that 10 cents. Once you've downloaded it, you get charged. I will say this. That opposition memorandum had exhibits that had upwards of 1,000 pages. And I didn't feel like people were going to look through that. Nor did I. I'm not going to sit here and say I did. However, in reading the entirety of the opposition memorandum, I did subsequently make a decision to go in and get exhibits F, G, and K. Because I found the reference to them to be quite interesting, and I wanted folk to have the ability to look at this. F is a deposition by Major Archodi, I hope I said that right, who is clearly an avid supporter of Lieutenant Stelly, and that will be readily evident in the deposition if you choose to read it. There was also a declaration filed by Carl Cezanne. Now, I wouldn't expect a lot of folk to remember that name or maybe even be familiar with, other than LSP folk, of course. But Cezanne was considered a strong candidate for potentially becoming colonel himself. And there was going to be a big award, a prestigious award, that was going to be conferred upon him, and reportedly Mike Edmondson swooped in and managed to finagle his way into getting it away from Cezanne and toward himself. That's been widely published. So, but Cezanne was extremely complimentary of John Stelly. Now, there's depositions in there from Lamar Davis, which we will provide for you, from Chavez Cameron, from Kenny Van Buren, and also former Colonel Reeves. To summarize what they are trying to say about Lieutenant Stelly, to try and explain away why he was never promoted in what he says is 35 times that he posted for a captain's position and was denied in every one of them. Never mind that he had the highest score, and according to him, and that's buttressed by the depositions that I've told you about, was by far the most qualified, and yet in instances African-American choices were made. That includes for Colonel Davis himself. And I think that, I believe it was Carl Cezanne that said he was far more impressed with John Stelly's interview than he was with, well, it was not Colonel Davis way back then, whatever his rank was. But it was Colonel Davis who got it, and never mind about Stelly's master's degree in mathematics, and some credits toward a PhD, and his extensive computer knowledge. because this was an information technology position that apparently it was felt like, or at least Stelly and some of his supporters felt like he was far more qualified than Colonel Davis. But in trying to explain away as best they could reasons that Stelly was denied, is they basically painted him out as a computer geek with little or no personal skills, no ability to connect. In fact, I believe Cameron may have used those. Well, I know Reeves did. He said that I just didn't see him being able to connect and communicate effectively. I'm just going to have to tell you, I take offense at that kind of commentary for somebody who scores well on exams, because, you know, I think most people, I don't tout it a lot, but I graduated from LSU with a 4.0, and I'm a CPA, and I will tell you, you get labeled. You know, you've heard it all, bean counter, you know, and I happen to believe my interaction skills are pretty darn good. But I'm aware of the labeling that can take place. I was teased in high school because I tended to perform quite well. I still remember his name. Mike Howard would always tease me and say, well, here comes Mr. IBM, you know. So you get stereotyped. And if you look at Major Archodi, and please forgive me if I'm botching his name, he describes highly exemplary communication skills, and the fact that he was over all of these troopers in Troop B, and he wrote some manuals and whatnot. I'm not going to get into the weeds because I want to try to keep this video becoming too long. I'm trying to give you an overview, but you can find it all in there if you choose to click on these links. That kind of touched a nerve with me personally for personal reasons. And I would hate to think that this man was denied these opportunities, at least by what we're reading of why they're excusing this away, is that they didn't feel like he had the people skills. I don't know that. And of course, the state police attorneys are basically, in their motion for summary judgment, they are saying that, look, you haven't proven anything in terms of actual evidence that race played the predominant role in the decision. And of course, when you look at Cameron's deposition and when you look at Davis's deposition, they ramble all over the place. And Davis will not answer a question with a yes or no answer. It's always, well, now there again, blah, 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 and goes off on. It's very frustrating to read his deposition. It was always frustrating to watch his testimony. But they really hammered him hard about there's that undeniable 7-second video wherein he said, look, it's no secret. Well, LSP has been historically white male. We've got to make change. Now, the LSP defense attorney wanted to say, why don't you play the whole video? I think Colonel Davis was very clear in that 7 seconds. And it's also interesting that Stelly's attorney said, did you have a diversity program? No, I had no policy on diversity. And then he points out, all right, let me provide you with this exhibit. It was an article in Louisiana Illuminator. We'll provide a link for that article, where the headline says, Davis transforming agency through diversity. And Davis's response was something along the lines of, look, I've done a ton of interviews, but you know, right near my retirement and past, I can't even remember all this stuff. So, boy, that's a heck of a way to try to scream out of this. And look, I know I'm laughing now. I'm trying to make a little bit joyous. I know it's no laughing matter for Lieutenant Stelly. And when you look at the ungodly number of hours that have been plowed into this, both on the defense side and certainly on the plaintiff's side, and while I do not know the particulars of the arrangement that exists between Stelly and his attorney. I do know that Jill Craft is just not typically going to take these type things contingency. He may have, I don't know, it's none of my business. But if he is by the hour, this has cost John Stelly, if it is by the hour, an awful lot of money. I really don't see the granting of the motion for summary judgment, but I've been surprised before by rulings. All I can say is when I made that presentation before the State Police Commission, where I emphasized how many disgruntled troopers there were about the perception that Colonel Davis was in fact providing priority to African Americans, and the sheer number of reports that I got in that regard, and it does not appear maybe that anybody's willing to testify to statements that he allegedly made in the various troops. I got some pretty testy communications from folk who were irate with him. So I find it difficult, my own belief, I find it very difficult to believe that everybody just decided to team up on Lamar Davis and paint a false picture of that. There are some other interesting things too. You'll see the specific ones that Lieutenant Stelly brings out. The Chavez Cameron promotion, the Treon Larvadain promotion. And by the way, now we find out that she had a fleet wreck in 2014. It turns out that Stelly also had one, but I believe it was in 1997 or 1998. But if you look at Major Archodi, again, I pray I'm getting that right, he has one performance review after another, spanning that time frame. I want to make one point before I wrap this up too. That certainly present an exemplary trooper that we could all be proud of. And remember, that has to be signed off on. It was signed off by different majors, Carl Saison being one, then later it became somebody else. So for those reasons, I don't think that the motion for summary judgment is going to be granted, but we'll have to wait and see. The other point I did want to make, and then we're going to wrap this up because it's running time. I try to get these things done, and I apologize if this one was a little long, but they have attacked John Stelly for the fact that he confined his period for doing his statistical analysis from, I think it was mid-2017, give or take. This is one thing I need a few notes on. Through the end of 2021. Please don't hold me to that beginning date. I'm going from memory. But the state police pointed out that, well, Colonel Davis made 7 promotions that were all white males in 2022. And you didn't bother with putting that in there. And Stelly said, look, I'm focusing on the time frame of which I am alleging that I was discriminated against. He said, perhaps they woke up and said, you know what, this is getting serious. We better mend our ways. That's pretty close to what he said. But he's saying, the period I supplied is the period that I am claiming that I was discriminated against. And I'm pretty sure I've got that first date right in whatever it is, mid-2017, because it pointed out that former Colonel Edmondson had Lieutenant Stelly do some kind of study and research, and I think it was 2012, y'all forgive me, I just can't, there's no way to remember all of this stuff. 2010, 2012, sometime in that time frame, and Stelly's finding was that there was no discrimination. And he said that subsequently he never felt still that there was any discrimination going on, and it was not until Chavez Cameron was put into the position that he was put into under, oh God, was that under, that would have been under Reeves, because I know Cameron ultimately became lieutenant colonel, and that was appointed, and I did learn that you can go straight from captain to lieutenant colonel, but at any rate, his focus was, look, I'm only worried about the period that I am claiming that I was discriminated against. If other people have other time frames, let them focus on that. No, I had no obligation to expand into 2022, and maybe they woke up and said, we got to bring a halt to this. Please accept my apology if this was a little bit long. I hope you found the material interesting. Even if you've watched this entire thing, trust me, you have an enormous savings of time of not having to read all of these filings, although you are most welcome to if you would like to. And if I do have something wrong, please forgive me. But again, I'm going from memory, and I feel certain that I outscored a certain prominent figure last Thursday night. And I hate to, I don't know, they're going to have to do something. The Democratic Party's going to have to do something. They just have to. So this is Robert Burns. I hope everyone has an upcoming enjoyable 4th of July weekend. And so thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you once again on another Sound Off Louisiana feature in the very near future. Happy 4th of July.